Hey all, so I'm going to take you through 3 different variations of a hip flexor move that's helped me massively improve the strength and flexibility in my hips. Don't worry if you haven't got any equipment, but for this I'm going to do a variation body weight, so I don't need anything. I'm going to do one with the looped band here, and then the last one I'm going to do with this band here with the handles. So a lot of people I work with tend to be sat at a desk quite often, so you're constantly in this position, really tightening up that hip flexor. But the problem is as well, not only does it get tight over time, always sitting like this for 8 hours a day, it also gets weak because you don't actually train it. So you just end up with this like really tight soreness across the hip flexor. And there could be a variety of reasons going on, but one thing could be to improve the hip flexor strength. So you should always check with a physio if you're not too sure, but if you know it's hip flexor strength you need to improve, let's go through it. Bodyweight version to begin with. So like I said, we want to stretch out the hip flexor as well as strengthen it. So to start off with, if you haven't got great knees, I will show you an alternative to this. But first of all, you're going to want to step back into a lunge position, but not like a standard lunge where we come in 90-degree angle with both legs. This is a lunge where you're really taking a big step back, because already I'm starting to stretch my hip flexor. Now, if it is really tight, obviously you don't have to step as far back, but if you have got that bit of flexibility just to get a big lunge in, start there. So as we drop down to the floor, now where I am in this long kind of position here, I can already feel my hip flexors starting to stretch, and I can even focus here on squeezing the glute, lifting my body slightly up, not extending through the back, so I'm not just tipping my upper body backwards, I'm pulling the hips through. And now this is really stretching. I can feel this stretch. I can even try and straighten out this leg. So I've got my knee bent at the minute, but the more I straighten out the leg, the more I can feel this hip flexor pulling. Now you don't want to overdo it. These are just points where you can get that into that position a little bit better. So let's go through that again. So stepping back nice and far, dropping yourself down, get yourself lifted, pull your hips in, squeeze the bum. Now I've got that stretch there. So from this position, I've got the opposing muscle groups contracted. So glute, little bit of an extension in my back. I'm trying to get my back and glute working together. I'm not just like coming through with my back. And then from here, I'm gonna drive through with my leg and closing the hip flexor, like really squeezing it at the top. So from this position, driving up and bringing my knee up nice and quickly. Now, you might not have the power to be able to do that in the hip flexor to begin with, and that's fine. You can simply get in that same position and just slowly bring yourself up to the top. If you haven't quite got the balance and control, but also you want to get this quite explosively in. So stepping back, a little bit of a stretch there, going forward and really squeezing into the hip flexor, stepping back, squeezing into the hip flexor, back into the hip flexor there. So that's going to be your first variation there. Now, if like your knees aren't too great, you can just do a slight step back, squeeze the bum. I can still feel my hip flexor stretching slightly, so you're not putting so much pressure on the front knee as you step back or the back knee. So even by squeezing my glute, keeping myself lifted, I can feel that hip flexor stretching now. I'll just drive up, back, and drive up. And that ties us nicely into going into the next one. Okay, so we need this little bit of equipment here, just this loop band. And all I want you to do is take it over both feet at the bottom there. Now I've got the band around my feet. So all I'm going to do is drive up through this knee. So same as the last variation I showed you, slight step back, just a little bit, just a tad. And then we're going to drive up through the knee. So now I've got a little bit of resistance to work on the hip flexor as I drive up nice and quick and explosively each time there. So less of a stretch on this one, stepping back a little bit to get a slight pull in the hip flexor, but more about that drive up to the top. Right, so last variation of this, all we need is this one. This resistance band with the handles, and I'm gonna just use this multi-gym here as an anchor point. So all I want you to do, if you are using a band like this, wrap around the anchor point. So all I've done is wrapped it here to here. and I'm just going to loop this through this end. And now I've got it looped on the multi-gym. So you should have that looped round. Now, all I want you to do is you're just going to tuck your foot in through the handle, so it's just resting on the top. It doesn't feel like it's super secure. You can get foot attachments for these, so if you've got one of those, that can be very helpful indeed. What we're going to do now is jump into the exercise, and this one's the same as the very first variation we did with the reverse lunge. Now you get to add a little bit of resistance there to make it slightly more challenging. So this one, I'm going to take a step forward, lunge down, so my back leg is nice and straight. I'm stretching out the hip flexor. I'm going to pull my hips in so I'm nice and upright, and from here I'm going to drive that knee forward and up to the top there. Back down, up to the top, back down, up to the top. So I'm getting a good stretch through my hip flexor, that as I come up to the top, I'm really squeezing and trying to strengthen that every single time. That's it. That's your 3 variations there. Nice and simple to focus on. Just make sure you're keeping that consistent. You can do it as your warm-up. So I often do these before I actually go into a leg workout or a more performance-based workout. I find it great just to warm up, or depending how much strength you need to build in your hip flexor, it's great to implement it as just a standard exercise. So doing 12 reps, 4 sets, 30 to 45 seconds rest and back in. It's only a banded or bodyweight exercise, so you're probably not going to need to rest that much. You know, obviously if it's very challenging for you, just take it a little bit longer to rest until that improves, and slowly start decreasing that rest time. And that's a good sign that you're getting stronger in that hip flexor. I hope that video helps, and I'll see you in the next one. Make sure you like and subscribe. It really does help.